As part of a promotion for a newly opened cinema, a masked staff member handed out free movie tickets to passersby, quickly drawing a large crowd. In the lobby, an eerie demon mask caught the attention of an elderly blind man. Though he couldn't see it, he sensed something unusual about it and warned his wife not to touch it. However, moments later, a woman put the mask on. When she took it off, her face was scratched, but she dismissed it, placing the mask back on display before heading into the screening room. Once the lights dimmed, a zombie horror film began, showing a group of young people who foolishly venture into a graveyard, where they find a demon mask and an ancient book. The book warns that anyone who wears the mask becomes a slave to the demon. Defiant, the main character in the film puts it on. The woman who had tried on the mask chuckled at this, but as the movie character removed the mask and found his face scratched too, his sinister gaze seemed to pierce the screen, locking eyes with her. She felt a sting on her scratch, and to her horror, blood began to seep from her wound again. She quickly headed to the restroom to clean it up. In the restroom, the woman frantically dabbed at her wound with tissue, but the scratch began to swell grotesquely, finally bursting into a pus-filled boil that oozed thick, sticky fluid, like melted ice cream. Horrified, she let out a scream. But worse was yet to come. Her friend, worried at her absence, came in to check and was shocked to find her transformed into a full-blown zombie, greenish liquid dripping from her mouth. Panicking, her friend tried to flee but got scratched in the scuffle, barely managing to hide in a nearby room to escape. Once the zombie moved away, she dashed back to the theater to ask for help. However, her own wound was quickly festering. Covered by the darkness of the theater, none of the viewers noticed anything strange at first. Then, a huge hole ripped through the movie screen, and the injured woman collapsed in front of it. Tony, one of the audience members, recognized her but was horrified as he saw her nails extending into claw-like points, her eyes twisting into a sinister red, like a cursed demon's. The terrifying scenes from the movie seemed to come to life as her monstrous transformation completed. The theater erupted in panic. People scattered in all directions. Those too slow were immediately attacked by the spreading zombies. Just then, the first woman to transform stumbled back into the theater and went straight for the blind old man, permanently blinding him. Chaos erupted as the audience scrambled for any exit. But when they reached the main doors, they found them securely locked, refusing to budge. After finally prying the wooden door off its hinges, they were greeted by a horrifying sight. A solid brick wall where the entrance had been. They could have sworn there was nothing there when they entered. Panic fully set in, and the crowd split up, frantically searching for any other way out. One woman ran into a small room, thinking it might lead to an escape, only to be cornered by a zombie. Before she could react, the creature attacked, ripping her skull open in a gruesome display. Hearing her screams, Ken and George rushed over, quickly slamming the door shut and pressing against it with all their might. But the zombie's strength was overwhelming, nearly forcing its way out. Just in time, Tony and a few others arrived and helped shove a vending machine in front of the door, finally trapping the zombie inside. Once they caught their breath, Tony pieced things together, realizing his friend's transformation into zombies was likely triggered by putting on the demon mask in the lobby, with the horror film somehow unleashing its evil force. Realizing they needed to work together, he led the group toward the projection room, hoping to turn off the film and stop things from getting worse. But when they burst in, there was no staff in sight. Every machine was running on its own, as if someone had set it all up. With no other choice, they started smashing the equipment, finally stopping the movie. They then headed to the second floor of the theater, where they found the blind old man sitting in a corner. He explained that his wife had also been attacked by a zombie and insisted the theater was cursed by a demon spell. Tony, with no patience for superstitious nonsense, cut him off, deciding to drag the old man's wife's body downstairs to prevent her from reanimating. Just as they reached the edge, ready to dispose of the corpse, a zombie suddenly lunged at Tony. Without hesitation, Tony pulled out a small knife, stabbing the creature several times before shoving it down the stairs. Not wanting to risk any more zombies sneaking up, Tony led the group to fortify the area, using chairs to block every entrance. But in the rush, he forgot about the unhandled body nearby. In the next moment, the body sprang to life and attacked Tony. With no way out, Tony used his last strength to drag the zombie over the edge with him, taking it down. The others had no choice but to keep fortifying the entrances with chairs and frantically smashed at the walls with fire extinguishers. After relentless effort, they finally managed to open up a large hole. But as they crawled inside, their hope turned to despair. they found themselves in a dead-end room with no way out. With their escape plan in shambles, the group sank into utter hopelessness. Meanwhile, a group of thrill-seeking teens, who had been evading the police, stumbled upon the back entrance of the cinema. Just when they thought they'd hit a dead end, the door mysteriously swung open on its own. Without a second thought, they slipped inside, unknowingly letting a zombie out in the process. As the police arrived and found the door locked, they failed to spot the zombie lurking behind their squad car, until it was too late. The officers, caught off guard, were quickly overtaken, and the infection began to spread outside the theater. Inside, the group of teens remained oblivious to the unfolding chaos beyond the walls. They wandered through the trashed lobby, growing anxious as they realized all exits seemed blocked. One guy spotted the door barricaded by the vending machine and called his friends over, thinking it might be a way out. Together, they pushed the machine aside, but instead of freedom, they released another zombie. Realizing the danger, they frantically retreated. Passing a large mirror, a fashion-conscious girl couldn't resist pausing to check her reflection and casually reapply her lipstick. As she leaned down to pick it up after it slipped from her hand, a zombie emerged from behind, attacking her on the spot. Her friends heard her scream and rushed back, only to find themselves face to face with a swarm of glowing-eyed zombies rushing toward them. In sheer terror, they sprinted towards the theater's main floor, only to find themselves surrounded. The survivors hiding on the second floor heard the commotion downstairs, mistakenly thinking rescue had arrived. In their excitement, they quickly removed the chairs blocking the entrance. But as they did, zombies crawled out from under the barricade, and the scene turned chaotic. Those who couldn't escape in time were bitten, and a woman hiding under a chair, trembling, was dragged out by a zombie, unable to evade her fate. George and the others, realizing the danger, scrambled to another exit and managed to clear the obstacles, escaping into a corridor. However, Kathy appeared injured. As the zombie horde approached, they hurried away and found a ventilation duct, hoping to crawl out to safety. Just as they were about to enter, Kathy suddenly slumped down with a strange look on her face. Cheryl moved closer to check on her, only for Kathy to undergo a sudden transformation. She had been scratched during their escape. Ken immediately grasped the situation and, without hesitation, used the iron grate from the duct to put an end to Kathy's suffering. As the three tried to catch their breath, they were horrified to see a tiny zombie crawl out of Kathy's back. Before Ken could react, the creature scratched him. Realizing he was doomed to turn, Ken, with a heavy heart, decided to leave alone to protect the others. But George and Cheryl couldn't bear to abandon him and chased after him. When they found Ken, he was already standing in the lobby, clutching a katana, moments away from full transformation. With his last trace of humanity, he begged George to end his suffering. George hesitated, struggling with the decision, but finally granted Ken mercy. Cheryl, who witnessed it all, ran to the screening hall in terror, only to realize more zombies were closing in. In a heroic moment, George roared into the theater on a motorcycle from the lobby, drifting to block the zombie horde and reaching Cheryl just in time to pull her up. As he circled around the theater, he swung his katana, cutting down several zombies in his path. But in a sudden misstep, the bike skidded and flipped, sending Cheryl tumbling. Luckily, only a few zombies remained. George calmly retrieved his katana and finished off the last of them. Cheryl was completely taken by George's bravery and was just about to thank him when the sudden roar of helicopter blades interrupted them. They ducked out of sight just in time as a helicopter crashed through the ceiling, slamming down into the theater below. Rushing over to inspect, they found that the pilot had been turned into a zombie, confirming their worst fear. The city outside had likely also fallen to the outbreak. Realizing their only escape was the opening made by the helicopter, George secured a rope with the onboard grappling hook, and he and Cheryl began climbing toward the hole. Halfway up, the zombified pilot grabbed Cheryl's leg. She kicked desperately, finally breaking free, and the two managed to escape onto the roof. Just as they caught their breath, the masked man who had handed out the movie tickets earlier appeared from the shadows, shoving George toward the open gap. George clung to a steel beam, holding on with all his strength as the masked man moved in to push him over. In a split-second decision, Cheryl plunged the grappling hook into the masked man's back. While he reeled in pain, George scrambled up, and together, they fought him off. With a sigh of relief, they climbed down to the street. But the streets were a nightmare. Zombies everywhere, hungry for blood. George and Cheryl ran for their lives, darting through the horde. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a car screeched to a stop in front of them. a family of survivors pulling them to safety. They all banded together, planning to escape the city. But not long after they started driving, Cheryl suddenly felt a strange pain in her neck. In seconds, her face changed as she turned into a zombie right before George's eyes. Before he could even react, the family's young son shot her. George was left in shock. He'd barely escaped that horror-filled theater, only to lose Cheryl, his last connection to his former life. Heartbroken but knowing he had no choice, George forced himself to bury the pain, joining the family as they continued down the road, heading into the unknown on a new path for survival.